Take over, okay?
Very good, Steve. Thank you. Well, my name's Tom. I'm an alcoholic. And I'm living tonight. Tonight I'm in Waynesville, North Carolina. And I've been up here since March this year now, since the COVID came. And I also live in Jacksonville, Florida in the winter. Very lucky, blessed guy. And man, I'm looking at this, the waiting room participants. There's 274 people here, you know, and the thing about Zoom has been such a gift to us as alcoholics. I think it's just this remarkable thing, you know, like you can go on to Zoom and you can go to a meeting anywhere in the world and you can hear the best speakers in AA, right? Unfortunately, you got me tonight. So let's see how this goes, you know. I'm a little nervous. I just have a talk with God and ask him to take away those things that'll stand in the way of my usefulness to my fellows here, and we'll see what happens. You know, I got a friend named Jim Fisher up here in the mountains over in Jackson County, and Jim says that his sponsor always passes out these little business cards, you know, and on the business card it says, he gives them to newcomers, and it's on the business card, says, please call me. I need to hear what I'm going to tell you. So, you know, I'm not sure what I'm going to say. I only got one story. I'm trying to find a way right now to get my feet under me and start. But I'm just dancing. I'm just tap dancing till God strikes me here. And I hope all of a sudden something's going to come out, you know. We read the story in the big book the other day. A drunk like you know, and the guy says, well, my story starts in the middle. My story starts kind of in the middle too. I'm going to start around step 7, because in step 7 it says that the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of all our steps. And you wonder sometimes, well, what's humility? And you look back in the book a little bit and it says that humility is knowing what and who you really are. And how do you find out what and who you really are? Well, the way I did it was go to AA and go to a lot of speaker meetings and hear over and over and over again, experience, strength, and hope. And I identified with those people and I came to understand the disease that I have. And I got a story. I found my own story. And I think that my story is my most important piece of knowledge that I have about myself, because my story is something that I take with me everywhere, especially to meetings, because when I take my story to a meeting, it allows me to identify with you when you share. You know, so I'm going to try and tell my story tonight. And my story starts like this. I was born absolutely perfect. And I was perfect for 10 seconds. The doctor slapped my ass and I got fear and resentment. Because I don't know where, I can't figure out another, where did that come from? Because it seems to me all my life I've had fear. You know, I was born up north of Boston in a little town called Haverhill. At 2 weeks old, I was baptized Catholic, so it's not something I chose. I didn't choose to be a Catholic. I was assigned Catholicism. You know, and I was an altar boy, and I was, I had the nuns for 8 years, and I had the brothers for a year. But being a Catholic's not what caused my alcoholism. I'm not an alcoholic because I was raised Catholic. You know, I'm an alcoholic because I had fear, doubt, and insecurity, and I don't know where it came from. I could never find the beginning of that thing. Where did it come from? You know, because all my life I had that fear. I always felt like I was less than if something was wrong. You know, that I was so self-conscious. I was shy and standoffish, and that less than feeling was just brutal. You know, and so driven by 100 forms of fear. I don't care what you call it, but you know, it could be fear, doubt, insecurity, apprehension, worry, anticipation. You know, shyness, whatever. All these kinds of fear. I had these fears. You know, I was an altar boy. I was probably the best altar boy they ever had in the Archdiocese of Boston, because Cardinal Cushing used to come pick me up in his Lincoln, and we'd drive around, dedicate statues, and confirm other little soldiers of Christ, you know, because I was an altar boy, and I was a great altar boy. But at 13 years old, I picked up a drink, and that was the end of the Cardinal. That was the end of being an altar boy. You know, up until then, everywhere I'd gone, every day I had a cassock and surplice, altar boy clothes on a coat hanger blowing in the wind wherever I went. I was always in church, and I did novenas and First Fridays and weddings and wakes and funerals and whatever, you know, I was always in church. I know today, 'cause I had trouble with the higher power thing, I think, I'm pretty sure today that I had a relationship with an institution, not with the God behind it, you know. So at 13 years old, I ran into this kid. His name was Andy, and Andy was, he went to public school. I went to Catholic school, you know, and he lived down the street. We decided that we had just moved into the neighborhood. So when I met Andy and I got into a little bit of a friendship, you know, and we decided one day that we were going to get drunk. And so we went to our respective homes and we got little Skippy peanut butter jars, and we took all the booze that we could get out of our parents' closets, cupboards. It was like the first Long Island iced tea. You know what I mean? It had all the booze was in that one Skippy jar, and we were down by the railroad tracks. And I drank that jar of Skippy. Man, I got hammered. I got so drunk. I know I blacked out. I blacked out the first time. Supposedly, I talked to girls. I threw up and got caught drinking, of course, by my parents. And I, of course, lied. So I can tell you today that I think maybe I started lying and drinking the same day. You know, that's what it feels like. Once I drank that first time, I couldn't wait to drink again. That's all I could think about was the next time I could drink. And at 13 years old, it's tough to get booze, but we had this guy, he's a hobo named Patrick, and Patrick lived in a refrigerator box behind the movie theater. And we'd go find Patrick in his little box, and we'd give him a couple of bucks, and he'd get booze for us, and he'd buy himself a little wine. You know. And when I could drink like that on Friday and Saturday nights as a kid in high school, and I wake up Sunday morning, 15, 16 years old with a little bit of a hangover, and you know, all I could think of is next Friday and next Saturday, where am I going to get the booze? I better find Patrick. Patrick, he better not die. He better be in his refrigerator box. He better be behind that movie theater because I need some booze. You know, because it's all I could think about. 15 years old. And then once I started drinking after we found Patrick Friday night, I started drinking and I couldn't stop. I could not stop drinking until it was all gone, until I was stopped while we were out. Like I said, started lying and drinking the same day. So what I can tell you is that as a kid, I had a threefold illness. I had obsession, I had compulsion, and I had a loss of spiritual values. It didn't stop me. I drank for 31 years. You know, I was in high school. I was a smart kid. I was that altar boy, you know, the Cardinals' favorite, and I was doing great in there. And the time I picked up a drink was in the summer between 8th grade and high school. And I was going from Sacred Hearts to Lawrence Central Catholic. I was going from nuns to brothers. And after 1 year with the brothers, they said they didn't want me back in that school anymore. And I was happy not to go back to that school. And I went to public school, and I thought public school was a piece of cake. You know, I had that little 9 years of Catholic education. I was a little bit ahead of everybody. You know, I felt, what's it say in the big book? We thought we could rise above the rest on our brain power alone. Yeah, I had that. I had potential. Terrible thing to tell a kid. You got potential. You know, so I didn't like school, so I didn't go much, you know. And in fact, I did better when I didn't go. I made the honor roll the less I showed up. I made the honor roll. And then, you know, senior year in high school, I was in college classes and all this stuff. But by the time I was a senior in high school, I was taking typing to get the last 3 credits to get my diploma. It was 1967. I was getting out of high school, and for like 5 years, more than that, every night on TV, we'd be watching this little war, you know, and this little war would come on TV with Huntley and Brinkley and Walter Cronkite and Harry and Howard, and every night they'd tell us how many Vietnamese we killed and then how many of us the Vietnamese killed. It went on every night, you know. And it's 1967, and I'm getting out of high school, and there's a draft, and I don't have a plan, because my plan was I just want to get out of high school, get a job, and drink. That was my horizon. And so when I got out of that school, I had to do something because I couldn't get a deferment. I found a little college that took me, and I went there for 3 semesters. And at the end of the 3rd semester in February 1969, I had a sparkling grade point average of 1.79. I needed a 1.8 to stay in. So by 1/100th of a point, I got bounced out of this little college, you know. And it's February '69. In May, I got a letter from Richard Nixon. Oh man, I got a letter from the president. You know, I got a letter from the president, and the president said, "Greetings, Tom. We request your presence." You know, so I went up to Boston and I took my physical and I passed, unfortunately. In August, I was at Fort Dix in 1969. There was a little thing called Woodstock going on down the road. In April of 1970, I woke up with the 101st Airborne in a place called Phu Bai in South Vietnam. Now, the thing about alcohol is it takes you places you don't want to go, with people you don't want to be with, doing things you don't want to do. And that's where alcohol took me. And man, I did my year over there and I came home, and now I really need to drink. Now I want to drink so bad, you know. I was gone all the 19 months, because if you get drafted in the 70s and you did 19 months and you came home from Vietnam, you had 5 months or less to go, they let you out. So it was 19 months. I was in and out, but I did what I did, used up, and I was bent, you know. And I'm back on the block with the boys I just left 19 months ago, and they're saying, "Where you been, Tom?" I said, "Man, you wouldn't believe where I've been, you know." I said, let's just get a drink. Can't we drink? Let's drink. Forget about that other stuff. And I drank as much as I could, as long as I could, whenever I could, wherever I could. You know, and I was 21 years old, and all I wanted to be was a 21-year-old kid. You know, I wanted to get a girlfriend. I wanted to get a car and a job and go back to school and do all those things, but mostly I needed to drink. So I got a job. I got a lot of jobs, couldn't hold the jobs, you know. I went back to school, couldn't stay in school, kept flunking out, you know. Got a girlfriend, and I was with her for 7 years, you know. It was a pretty interesting time. Up until recently, she held the record. But I just got married a few years ago, and I've been with Diane for 10 years now. I got married for the first time at 66. I saved myself. You know, so about 1977, Tina says, you know, you're driving a 62 Chevy, you can't hold a job and you can't stay in school. It's 1977. What are you going to do? I said, well, so she threw me out, you know. And to this day, I'm convinced that she could not see my potential, you know. So I take everything I own and I throw it in the back of that 1962 Chevy. And I got $5 and I landed up in Nantucket because somebody gave me a boat ticket to go on the ferry. So I went out to Nantucket. If anybody's familiar with Nantucket, it's a little island 30 miles off the coast of Massachusetts. It's a little drinking village with a fishing problem, you know. It is a beautiful, beautiful place. It's paradise. And in 1977, I've been hanging around there since 1971. And when I got out there in 77, it was just like, it wasn't a brand yet, you know. It wasn't like Goldman Sachs East. It wasn't Wall Street world. It was Nantucket paradise. And we were out there, and all we did was drink and fish and drink and fish and drink and fish. And some days we didn't fish. You know, that's how life was. It was a great life. And there was a lot of people just like me, because if you want to be a drunk, the best place to be a drunk is 30 miles to sea. Go out, you know, get offshore, get out there. It's beautiful. You know, and in spite of myself, you know, I tended bar and I fished and I commercial scalloped and I dug ditches. I did carpentry. I did whatever to stay there, but I wasn't paying much attention because mostly I just wanted to drink. And the island started to build up around us, you know, and it started to get really fancy. The money was coming in. They were building these monstrous houses, and a lot of my friends were carpenters. So I said, well, you know, you got all these jobs going. What are you doing with all the crap that you know? So I said, well, I'll get a truck. And I started a rubbish company, and I started hauling the debris from all these building sites, you know. And within a few years, I had 450 customers, and I had 3 trucks, and I had 10 guys, and I'm making money hand over fist. It was unbelievable. And I was drinking. I couldn't stop drinking. I became a 24/7 drinker. I drank all the time. All the time. And I couldn't go more than 3 hours without a drink. Because if I went more than 3 hours without a drink, my eyes would get all watery, you know, and they'd turn red, and I'd get that clammy feeling, you know, like when you just get out of the shower and you feel like you need another shower. You know, that clammy feeling, you ever had that feeling, you know, and you start to shake and you get the dry heaves and you get the diarrhea, and you know you need to drink. You know you need to drink. So I was a smart kid. I told you I was a smart kid, you know. I'm the Cardinals' favorite. I'm the decorated veteran. I'm the successful business guy, you know. So I got a plan. And every night before I went to bed, I'd make sure I had a bottle of whiskey to put beside the bed. And I'd pass out about 9 o'clock, and I'd come to at midnight. And I had that feeling. And I'd reach over and I'd grab that bottle of whiskey and I'd drink that whiskey. And then I'd pass out again. And then I wake up about 4 o'clock. And there's nothing to drink. There's nothing to drink. And I can't go more than 3 hours without a drink, and the liquor store doesn't open for 4 hours. And it would start. The watery eyes, the bloodshot, the clammy feeling, the shakes, unbelievable shakes, the dry heaves, the diarrhea. The guys would be coming for work. I couldn't fill out their work orders. I couldn't sign their checks anymore. I needed to drink. And I'd jump in that truck and I'd go down. I'd be at the liquor store at 5 minutes to 8 when the door opened. And I'd slide in the side door because I didn't want anybody to see me, you know. And I'd get a few nips of Jameson's and I'd get back in my truck and I'd be shaking so bad. I would shake so bad I couldn't get the tops off, those little nips, you know what I mean? You're just like this. Finally, you get the top off one of them and you pour it down your throat like that and you puke out your nose at the same time. I know I wasn't a social drinker. Sitting in my truck every morning. Well, Catholics, the Catholic kid, the Cardinals' favorite, the decorated veteran, the successful business guy, puking like crazy in the front of his truck every morning. I knew I had to do something. You know, I'd had my first DUI in 1979. That was my first AA meeting. Then I had to go to AA. I came in, I said, I don't want nothing to do with this. You know, I'm not here for AA. I don't want to stop drinking. I just went because the court told me to go. I had another arrest, another DUI in 1982, another one in 1989, and now it's 1991, and I can't stop drinking. I've been in a couple of rehabs, a couple of hospitals. I used to go in Nantucket Hospital 3 days, 4 days at a time just to dry out, come out, and drink some more. So I'm like 41 years old, and what else does a 41-year-old Irish guy do? You know, I was right on schedule because I moved back in with my mother. I left the island and came back to the mainland. It's like, hey, honey, I'm home. Boy, was she glad to see me, you know. But that's what a 41-year-old Irish guy does, right? With nowhere to go. Moves back in with his mother. So I knew that I couldn't drink the way I'd been drinking. I'd been in some rehabs. I'd sobered up a couple of times, and now I'm living in one room in her house, and I'm trying not to drink. And it's driving me crazy, and I'm becoming a periodic. And that's how big my world is, that one room. And every now and then, that room would be too much, and I'd slide out of that room, and I'd get a drink. And whenever I got a drink, I would end up either in another detox, another rehab, a jail, usually a psych ward. The VA psych wards were, I was telling somebody about it tonight, you know, you'd be in there with all these guys that call it the flight deck. And you're on the flight deck and everybody around you's got these paper slippers and a bathrobe on that's shuffling and drooling like crazy. And after a while, you think you're a shuffler and a drooler, you know? That's who they put us with. That's where alcoholics end up. That's an alcoholic of my type, the hopeless variety. That's where we ended up, you know. And I'd be in and out of these things for 4 or 5 days at a time. And I'd drink and I'd be back in there. And I'd like, you know, I used to take so many pills. It was just crazy. They used to give me all these medications, you know. So I'm staying with my mother, and it's February now, 1994. And she went into this spell, her heart, you know, so the ambulance came and we put her in the ambulance and we took her to the hospital, and the doctor said, it's congestive heart failure. She's going to be okay, but she's going to stay here for about 5 days. And this is February, and I had gone since December without a drink. I'm 3 months sober. No AA. I don't need you. I'm not going AA. But I'm not drinking. So I go home and there's nobody home. Oh, there's nobody home. I'll get a 6-pack. I got a 6-pack of beer on a Monday, and the next thing I knew, the phone was ringing. It was Friday. Because I don't know how you drink, but this is my plan. You know, I'll drink Monday and Tuesday. I'll sober up Wednesday and Thursday, and I'll be good for Friday. But once I put that drink in me on Monday, the next thing I know, the phone's ringing. It's Friday, and it's the doctor saying, "Come get your mother." Okay. And I went to get my mother, and I brought her home, and she says, "You're drunk again." And I said, "Yes, I am." And she said, "What are you going to do this time?" I said, "Well, I'm going to the Manchester, New Hampshire VA because they really like me there." So I went up and I checked in there again for the how many time, I don't know. And I stayed in this little room behind the nurse's station with a woman named Claudette. And Claudette sat with me for 2 nights while I went through the heebie-jeebies and the screaming and all that crap. And I walked out of that hospital on the 5th of March, 1994, and I haven't had a drink since. It was hospital number 25 or 30. I don't know. I don't know exactly. I don't know, jails, institutions, you know. And I don't know exactly what happened, but this is what I believe. I believe that's the day that God said, "Tom, you don't have to do this anymore. You don't have to drink like this. You don't have to do this." And 26 days later, my mother passed, and I didn't drink. In May of that year, I checked into White River Junction VA Hospital in the National Center for Post-Traumatic Stress, and I spent 6 weeks there. And I came out of that hospital on the 4th of July, 1994, and I had nowhere to go because the house was gone. My mother was dead. All the stuff I owned was in this little car that I had, an old Ford Bronco 2 now with a smashed in front end that I crashed when I was trying to kill myself one day. All these stories, you know. And so I checked into New England Shelter for Homeless Veterans in downtown Boston, the House of the Purple Hearts. And I'm standing in that shelter and I'm thinking, you know, if I could get a job and a car and a girlfriend and a place to live, I'll go to AA. You know, if I get my life in order, I'll go to AA. I still think that way sometimes. Sometimes I think if I could just lose 15 pounds, I'll join the gym. You know, I'll get a gym membership. But I'm not going there until I'm in shape. You know, I'm not going to AA until I feel good. And I'm in that shelter, and one of the first thoughts I had, honest to God, I was like, I don't drink because I have problems. I have problems because I drink. And the psychic change had begun, you know, after I was about 3 months sober. And this woman came up to me, and her name was Brenda Smith, and she worked for the VA. And she's big, tall, skinny, blonde girl from Iowa. And she said, "My name's Brenda Smith, Tom, and I'm going to be your homelessness counselor." And I said, "Geez, Brenda, I don't think I need much more counseling. I'm already homeless, you know." But Brenda was the greatest, you know. She got me a shelter promotion. I got promoted from an urban shelter to a suburban shelter. I'm out in Leominster, Massachusetts now, and I'm in a place called the Homestead. And I walk in there, and there's a guy named Jack Duty. He goes, "My name's Jack Duty. I'm the house manager. You want to stay in my house, you got to go to AA." I said, "But howdy doody, you know, howdy, I'm not going to AA. There's God at AA, and I don't do God." He said, "Well, you don't do this house either." And so perhaps I'll reconsider, you know. So I went to AA. And so when I get to AA, I didn't have a desire to stop drinking. What I had was a desire to live indoors. You know, what it says in the 3rd step is we get here by circumstance, not by virtue. I didn't come here to get sober, to find God, to make friends, to eat the stale cookies or drink that shitty coffee. I came because there was no place else to go. And I didn't want to be there. I would have done anything to not be there. There I was in AA. And like I said, my first meeting was in 1979, and my last first meeting was in August of 1994. That's when I finally pulled in here. And it took me a while, but I looked around the room, and I was the most miserable guy in the room, and everybody seemed happy. And I look around, and I think there's something wrong with them people. You know, I'm right. You know, you people are wrong. There's something wrong with you. But I came long enough to get the feeling that sober was better than drunk, you know. And I think what really happened is I started to realize that I wasn't there to not drink. I was there to learn to live sober. So instead of trying to prevent this negative event, which was drinking, I started to pursue this positive event, which was sobriety. And my life turned around. I started chasing it. You know, I was in that homeless shelter for until November that year. And I got out of there the night before Thanksgiving. So Thanksgiving morning, 1994, I woke up in my own apartment with a couch and a bed. Section 8, you know, government's good to me. And, you know, I think that God took the obsession from me that day in March in 1994 up in Manchester, New Hampshire, but he left the insanity because there was a lot of work to be done. You know, there was a lot of work to be done. I had troubles. I mean, I had difficulty dealing with people. I had difficulty going to the grocery store. You go in with a cartload of groceries and leave them there, you know. Then I had to get a guerrilla shopping rules. I had guerrilla shopping rules. Like I go shopping, I've got to be there at 5 minutes 8 when the door opens, right? Just like the liquor store. I got to get a carry basket. Never get more than eight things. Start at the day-old bread section. Get the hell out of there before anybody comes. And that's how it started, you know. I started doing demolition in this old crack house that they were turning into a veterans house, transition home for vets. And I go into this place, it was a crack house. You can imagine the human detritus in a crack house. All the windows are boarded up. There's no electricity. I go in there with a sledgehammer and a flashlight and take down walls. And I got rid of some of that I had, you know, because I had it bad. Then somebody gave me a lawnmower. I started cutting grass, man. I was cutting grass everywhere. And then I met this guy on a Saturday night in Newburyport, Massachusetts. And he comes into this AA meeting. I'm 2 years sober now. And he walks in, he's got like the $50 haircut, you know. He's got the buttery soft leather jacket, you know. Oh my God. He's got tassels on his shoes, you know. He's got Gucci shoes, this boy. So he looks at me, he says, I'm new. I said, yeah, no shit. You know, sit down, shut up, pay attention. A couple of weeks later, he sees me and I'm mowing a lawn. And he says, you live here? I said, no, I'm mowing the lawn. He said, what do you do? I said, I mow lawns. I said, what do you do? He said, well, I got this little business down the street here. And, you know, he says, let's go to a meeting. We got to be friends, this guy. And he says to me one day, he said, if I put a computer in your house and you do some research for me, every week I'll give you $100. I says, yeah, put it in there. It's 1997. The internet's coming, right? He put that computer in my house and I was like, boom, computers. I knew all about them as soon as I turned them on. It just came to me. The next thing you know, I'm the information services manager for his company. And then I'm the executive assistant to this CEO guy in New Jersey, you know, and at 5 years sober, I bought a house. I bought a house in Newburyport. I got a house. I'm sitting in this house and I'm waiting for the rich guy to come home, you know, and throw me out of there because I can't figure that. It doesn't dawn on me that I got this. This is my house. I had a heart attack. I didn't drink, got crazy, sold all my furniture and moved away from my brand new house and went back to Nantucket because I figured that's where I should be buried. And I was down there about 10 days and all of a sudden I realized, what did you just do? I took all my stuff, put it back in the car, got on the ferry, went back to my empty house and my empty brand new house in Newburyport. Couldn't get my job back, couldn't get my furniture back. I'm in this empty house with no job and no prospects all over again, 5 years sober. And I learned my lesson. When you get like that, you don't sell the furniture, you just rearrange it. You know what I mean? That's the key here. And for the next 2 years, I struggled. And then I got that job in New Jersey, and then my life turned around again. You know, but all this time, it was a matter of doing the steps, like coming to understand that I'm powerless over alcohol. What more did I need to know? You know, it's just coming to a conclusion. If I just look at my life, given the evidence, I can't drink in safety. My life's unmanageable. I was living down in Stuart, Florida for about 10 years, and I used to take a meeting into Unity Rehab every Friday morning, and I'd go in there with all these young kids, you know, and there's like 65 to 80 kids, and we go in, And I walk in, I give one guy more about alcoholism. I give another guy how it works. And I say, okay, you read more about alcohol. He reads, do a good job. The other guy would start to how it works. And he's reading it. He's about 32 years old. He's about 8 days sober. And he's reading it. He gets to step one. He goes, one, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unimaginable. Unimaginable. What a malapropism that is. That is so perfect, because at 32 years old and 8 days sober, it's unimaginable to him that that's the best he could do with his life. How many times did I wake up in those things thinking, is this the best I can do? The real thing about unimaginable is that if he stays sober 20 years like I've been sober, he's going to get a life like me. And it's unimaginable to him where he's sitting that he can have my life if he just keeps coming to AA. It's unimaginable, isn't it? Step two is another conclusion. I'm sitting in a room. I'm the only guy that's got his thumb up his ass, and everybody's happy, joyous, and free. And I come to the conclusion that maybe I'm wrong, because you people, something's working for you. If it works for you, maybe it'll work for me. It took me 32 months to get around to doing a third step. I was up in Newburyport there, and 32 months I was sober. You know, and I was going to meetings every day, and I would go to the Monday night, it was a big book, and Friday night was a step meeting at the Immaculate Conception Church on the 3rd floor. And this one Friday night in December, I went to the step meeting, and I walked in the snow up to the church, up on the 3rd floor, and we're reading the 12th step, and I got the facing page on step 12. You know the facing page with the big long paragraph? Step 1, boop, 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 right? You don't want to read that paragraph. That paragraph goes on and on and on and on, you know. It's not how it works. It's how's it working. When I did step 1, this happened. When I did step 2, this happened. When I did step 1, right? That paragraph there. And I read that thing. I said, this stuff isn't happening for me. I'm not getting any of this. I don't feel this stuff. And they told me at the end of the meeting, you know, Tom, you've got to start doing it the way it's laid out, not your way. You got to stop doing it Tom's way, because Tom was the guy who would tighten his chin, you know, pull on his helmet, tighten his chin strap, and go harder. Go harder, go harder, go harder. I was self-will run riot, even in sobriety, and I was going to get it my way and do it my whatever, you know. And I went home to my little apartment that night. It was up on the 3rd floor of an old building in Newburyport, Massachusetts, and I'm up there, and I went in, and I pulled down all the shades, and I shut off all the lights, and I knelt down beside my bed, and I went, psst, psst. Hey, God, are you here? Hey, God. God, if you're here, I need some help. And it was the hardest night of my life, I think, because for so many years, I had blasphemed. I had hated God. I had denied God. I had argued the existence of God with anybody that wanted to argue. You know, those late night arguments, you know. And so here I was, like saying all of a sudden, man, I've been wrong for all these years. Because I'll tell you, I was on an airplane one night. We were leaving New Jersey, and we were going to Vietnam. And we left New Jersey, and we landed in Anchorage, Alaska. And then we went over to Osaka, Japan. We had to refuel the plane in Osaka. So we got off for a while, and we get back on, and we're going across the South China Sea, and we're not really at altitude. It's the middle of the night. And you're sitting on the airplane, and you're trying to sleep, and nobody's sleeping. Everybody's so afraid. The lights go down, you know, but you can smell the fear on the airplane. And I'm writing in this little notebook. I'm saying, hey, God, after all I've done for you, look what you're doing to me. I blame God for me going to Vietnam. I blame God for the draft. I blame God, you know, so my 4th step, when I got around to the 4th step, you know, my list was them. Republicans, Democrats, men, women, black people, white people, Catholics, Protestants, Jews, whatever, all of them. Because all of them made my life miserable. And I didn't have no higher power. And that night I asked God for help. You know, it's tough to do a 3rd step. Like it says in the 3rd step, your whole program depends on how well you persistently try this step. Well, it's a difficult task to try that step when you can't do the 2nd step, you can't do the 3rd step. If you can't come to believe in a power greater than yourself, how do you trust and turn your will and life over to him? Couldn't do it until that night. Because after I did that, you know, my life turned around, and all of a sudden it just like the trend has been up ever since. If you ever put on CNBC in the morning, you put the stock market show on there, you know, and it looks like on there that the stock market started way down here, that's way up here now, and it looks like it went like that. Well, it didn't. It goes like this. Right? And that's what my life has been, up and down, good days, bad days. This whole time I've been sober, but the trend has been up right since that third step. You know, I say this, I say, you know, when there's new people in the room, I don't like to say, hi, my name's Tom, I'm from the fourth dimension, you know, because that kind of scares me. They think it's a little sci-fi thing going on here, you know, but that's the way I feel. I've been in the fourth dimension for a long time. I love it here. It's so pink, you know. We got around to that fourth and fifth. See, that woman, Brenda Smith, she used to say to me, Tom, what do you want out of life? And I'd say, geez, Brenda, I just want to be happy. And she'd say, could you be more specific? And I said, no. I don't know what's going to make me happy. But as we went through the steps, you know, especially 4 through 9, what happened is that the things that made me unhappy got removed, and what was left was happy. Isn't that the most remarkable thing? Who knew that was going to happen? So I find that this program isn't, I'm not here to get stuff. I'm here to get stuff removed, because remember, I was born absolutely perfect. I want to get back to that. I want to be that person that God wanted me to be all this time. And I've been able to get there. You know, step 7 is so important to me. When I was in an AWOL early on, and one of the guys in there, we were talking about step 7, and you know how humility comes up, and the guy says, you know, if you got true humility, you can't be humiliated. Whoa, all the tumblers clicked, right? Because all my life I've been so afraid of being ashamed or embarrassed or caught or seeing less than and all that stuff. And all of a sudden I realized that I cannot be ashamed or embarrassed if I have true humility. There's no reason to be afraid. I can take a risk and fail. I can make a mistake. I can be human. I can be me. Whoa. I skipped step 6, but I'll tell you, you know, I've had cancer lately. I got it 5 years ago. I had the surgery, I had the radiation. I've had 3 years on and off chemo. And when I first got it, I had the surgery, right? And then I had to have the radiation. This doctor said, you got to take this stuff Lupron. I said, I don't want to take Lupron. I said, what happens if I do take it? He said, well, your voice might change and your breasts might get bigger. I said, well, I don't think I want to take that stuff, you know? So every night I'd be kneeling beside my bed. I say, hey, God, thanks for another day of sobriety. Please take away the cancer. Every night, thanks God for another day of sobriety. Please take away the cancer. One night I'm kneeling beside my bed. I'm going, please God, thank you God for another day of sobriety. Please take the cancer. And I hear this voice from like out of the closet, and it says, take the goddamn medication. You know, because step 6 is God will not render you white as snow without your cooperation. If I don't take the medication, how's he going to help me? Right? Boom, step 6. Step 7, 8, 9, whoa. Made that list. Thought it's going to require bulk mailing. You know, there's going to be a lot of people on this list. You know, it's funny when you go to a Zoom list, a Zoom meeting, it's like looking at a page of stamps. You know what I mean? You ever seen a sheet of stamps? Right? It's a good thing none of you are canceled. Canceled, every one of you. But this is, you know, so I'm thinking, oh, how am I going to get all these people, make all these apologies? And then I realized, you know, I'm not that powerful. I'm not that important. I didn't have that effect on everybody. But the biggest promise in the whole book is in there for me. Defective relations with other human beings has always been the cause of our woes, including our alcoholism, but no field of investigation will yield greater results. Whoop. Is that a big promise or what? Right? What does a human being want? The human condition is we all want to love and be loved, and we wouldn't know love if we tripped over it, right? Love to me was like, I'll take guitar lessons, or I'll get some English leather or some Madras pants or something. I'll get a girlfriend. That's love, right? Jesus, no wonder I had to wait till I was 66. You know, but that's the thing that AA has given me. It's given me the ability and the pleasure and the gift of loving and being loved. Wow. I was that homeless guy, man. I was that guy in the nut houses. I was with the shufflers and the droolers. I was with them people. Step 10, you know, sometimes the biggest thing about step 10 is I didn't hurt anybody's feelings. I didn't cut you off in traffic. I don't have to admit I'm wrong there. When I have to admit I'm wrong is when I'm thinking, when I make a bad decision or a poor choice. That's when I have to admit I'm wrong. When I just did something stupid, I have to admit to myself that was wrong. That's where step 10 comes to me. 11, sought through prayer and meditation to improve my conscious contact with God, praying only for knowledge of his will and the money to carry that out. I knew God wanted good things for me, and they were going to be expensive. Step 12, you know, like Stephen mentioned, I got this little thing I do in the morning too. I started in 1998 with 10 friends, and now it goes to a whole bunch of people, and I enjoy sending it. And I didn't know when I started it why I started it, but you know what? The theme of AA's 12th step is the joy of living. I got the joy of living. Give me some more of that joy stuff, man. I love that joy stuff, you know? And that's what I found. And those are the 12 steps for me. You know, one of the first hospitals I was in was a Bedford VA hospital, and there was a guy in there named Patrick, and he was the same as I was, going into Unity to that recovery center, bringing in a meeting on a Friday morning. And Patrick used to come in there and he'd say, "My name's Patrick." I swear to God, he was a leprechaun. He was from South Boston, this little Irish guy. And he'd say, "My name's Patrick. I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety is my most precious possession." And I'd be going, "Jesus, Patrick, get a life, will you?" You know, because I could not imagine somebody that would treat find sobriety as the most important thing that ever happened to them. Because it was years before I got sober. I mean, I was on Nantucket in one of those meetings I was forced to go to by the judge, and I'm sitting there, and the lady at the top table sharing, and her clothes are worth more than my truck. You know what I mean? She's dripping in diamonds and gold and all like that. And she goes, "I knew I was an alcoholic when my husband wouldn't let me take the Bertram out alone anymore." Well, Jesus, the Bertram's a 45-foot boat. You know what I mean? And I didn't identify with that lady. 7 years later, when I'm standing in a homeless shelter, and I realized that her worst day and my worst day were absolutely the same. She couldn't have felt any worse that day when he took the keys to the boat away than I could feel standing in that shelter wondering, how the hell did I get here? This is unimaginable. Boy, that's what it's like. I was telling some guys this morning, you know, there's a reading on the 5th of July in the 24-hour-a-day book in the meditation paragraph. I'm going to paraphrase this. It says that you cannot forever postpone God's will for your life. You can choose the path of good, of evil, or of destruction, but at some point God will pluck you off that path and put you where you belong. Will pluck me. I got plucked, you know. And that's the best thing that ever happened to me. You know, the last place I ever wanted to be was Alcoholics Anonymous. The best thing that ever happened to me is Alcoholics Anonymous. The second thing I was never going to do was get married. The second best thing I ever did was get married. You know what? I have not a clue what's best for me. I don't know. I got to come to meetings every day. I got to go zoom the road of happy destiny here and be with you people every day and try to figure out what it is I should be doing. Because God works through people. My problem is I don't know which one of you is God today, so I have to listen to every one of you. And there's 275 of you here tonight. Too bad you got to listen to me. You know, I got a sponsor, and his name's Ron, and Ron will say, you know, if you come to AA and you stay here long enough, you'll become the person you couldn't stand when you walked in. And how right is that? Because you know what? I'm just like Patrick now. You know what I mean? My sobriety is my most precious possession. And how did that happen? How did that happen? It happened a day at a time. God, I'm so grateful to be sober. I love being sober. I absolutely love being sober. It's the most important thing in my life. Because if I didn't have sober, I wouldn't have anything. They taught us in the beginning, first things first. I'll end with this little story. I was in London one night. And I'm flying home. I'm coming home. See, I mean, I'm the homeless guy, and I'm in London. How's that working out? Huh? You know what I mean? And I was on the way home from Spain, right? So I stopped in London, and I said, "Where's there a good meeting tonight?" And they said, "Oh, they'll go to the beginners meeting at the Church of Scotland in Sloane Square." I said, "Oh, great! I'll go to the beginners meeting at the Church of Scotland in Sloane Square. I want to hear pip pip cheerio out. I want to hear the English accent." You know, so I walk into this Church of Scotland to hear the beginners meeting, and this big guy stands up and he goes, "My name's Frank. I'm from New York City." You know, so I didn't get to hear pip pip and cheerio. You know, but Frank's theme that night was like, "Hey, if you're new and you're having trouble with the steps, do the slogans." Right? Remember when I came in Massachusetts, there's all these blue and gold banners that look like Swedish flags hanging around the rooms, you know, and they were made out of that Velvet Elvis shit, you know. So they would be, that's first things first, but for the grace of God, a day at a time, you know, all that. And I thought, my God, look at those. Those are the most trite cliches I've ever read in my life. And about 6 months sober, I'd be having a bad day, and I'd be going, "Okay, Tom, first things first. Easy does it, Tom." And I started talking to myself in alcoholese. You guys were getting in there. And the psychic change was underway. Like a light bulb, you know? I had to be unscrewed. And I had to be unscrewed very carefully because I was so cross-threaded. It was amazing. I had no idea what was going on, you know? And here I am in a room with 271 people who are outright mental defectives in full flight from reality, and my job is to impress you. What am I thinking? That's my disease. That's alcoholism to me. I just want you to like me. I don't want you to think I'm stupid. I don't want you to think I'm less than. You know, Jesus, it's like being in the VA with all them guys in the paper slippers. I'm trying to make friends with them, you know? Oh my God. I'm so grateful to be here. And thank you, Stephen, for asking me to share. I don't know where he is. All these pages. I don't know. Oh, there he is. I'm going to just close there and say thank you very much for having me.